Nah, I'd win. The strongest sorcerer of the modern age stood in complete darkness, his 6 eyes piercing through dimensions most couldn't even perceive. Satoru Gojo had faced death before, but this time felt different. The King of Curses wasn't just flexing his power anymore. Sukuna had evolved into something that defied every calculation, every strategy Gojo had ever devised. Yet as the ancient curses domain began to manifest around them, reality itself bending to accommodate 20 fingers worth of malevolent energy, Gojo's lips curved into that familiar, insufferable smile. "You know what, Sukuna?" he said, adjusting his blindfold one final time. "Nah, I'd win." The declaration echoed through Shibuya's twisted remains, where buildings hung suspended in cursed energy, and the very air crackled with tension that could crush ordinary humans. Students who had trained under Gojo's guidance felt their hearts stop, not from fear, but from the absolute certainty in his voice. This wasn't bravado. This wasn't the cocky attitude that had carried him through countless battles against special-grade curses. This was something else entirely. Megumi, still struggling to understand his own shadows, wondered if his sensei had finally lost his mind. But Nobara, bloodied and exhausted, recognized the tone immediately. It was the same voice Gojo used when he promised them they'd all survive their first real mission. Sukuna's laughter filled the domain, a sound that had silenced armies and toppled kingdoms centuries before Tokyo was even a dream. "Interesting words from someone about to become my appetizer," the curse sneered, his forearms already weaving the hand signs for Malevolent Shrine. The slicing techniques that had torn through Mahoraga began to manifest. Invisible blades that could cut through anything, space, time, the very concept of defense itself. Domain expansion was supposed to be an assured hit. Against anyone else, Sukuna's victory would have been guaranteed the moment his domain activated. But Gojo wasn't anyone else. The limitless technique began to hum, that familiar blue energy that had redefined what it meant to be untouchable. Yet something was different this time. The blue seemed deeper, more concentrated, as if Gojo had been holding back fundamental aspects of his power even during his most desperate battles. His students had seen red technique, the repulsive force that could level city blocks. They'd witnessed blue, the attractive force that bent reality around Gojo's will. They'd even seen purple, the impossible combination that erased whatever it touched from existence. But this was something new, something that made Sukuna's confident expression falter for the first time in 1,000 years. "Domain expansion," Gojo whispered, and the world held its breath. "Infinite void." Two domains collided, and the fabric of reality screamed. Inside the overlapping spaces, Yuji felt his consciousness fragmenting. He was still connected to Sukuna, still aware of the curse's thoughts and emotions, but something else was happening. Memories that weren't his own began flooding his mind. Not from Sukuna, but from somewhere else entirely. Images of a time before curses, before sorcerers, when the balance between life and death operated under completely different rules. He saw Gojo not as a teenager or even as a child, but as something older, something that had been waiting for this exact moment across multiple lifetimes. The revelation hit Megumi like a physical blow. His sensei hadn't been born with the 6 eyes by accident. Maki, watching from the edge of the domain's influence, felt her cursed tools responding to energies she didn't understand. The weapons that had been passed down through the Zenin clan for generations were humming with recognition, as if they remembered being forged for this specific battle. Her grandfather's story suddenly made sense. The legends about a sorcerer who could stand against the King of Curses weren't myths about the future. They were memories about a cycle that had repeated before. Inside the domain clash, Sukuna's certainty began to crack. The slicing techniques that should have reduced Gojo to nothing were being redirected, not just deflected or absorbed, but fundamentally altered at the moment of impact. Each attack he launched came back transformed, turned into something that hurt him instead of his target. This wasn't possible. Domain expansion was absolute. The sure hit effect couldn't be negated, only overpowered by a stronger domain. But Gojo wasn't overpowering Malevolent Shrine. He was rewriting the rules that made it work. "You want to know the real difference between us, Sukuna?" Gojo's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing through both domains simultaneously. His blindfold had fallen away, revealing eyes that no longer looked entirely human. You became the king of curses by consuming power. I became the strongest by understanding what power actually is. The six eyes weren't just seeing cursed energy anymore. They were perceiving the mathematical principles that governed reality itself, the equations that kept existence stable. And Gojo was changing the variables. Toj, hidden several blocks away with the other first years, felt his throat tighten with words he couldn't speak. His cursed speech technique was reacting to something in the air, recognizing a frequency of power that made his own abilities seem like whispers compared to a hurricane. Whatever Gojo was doing, it was operating on the same fundamental level as cursed speech itself, the level where words could reshape reality. The domain battle reached its crescendo, and Sukuna realized with growing horror that he was losing. Not just the clash of techniques, but something deeper. His very nature as a curse was being questioned, examined, and found wanting by whatever Gojo had become. The fingers that had given him form, the vessels that had carried his consciousness across centuries, all of it was being unraveled by someone who understood curses better than they understood themselves. "This is impossible," Sukuna snarled, pouring every ounce of his accumulated malice into one final attack. "I am the undisputed king. I am the one who stands atop all curses and sorcerers alike." Gojo's smile widened, and for a moment, every person in Tokyo felt a strange sense of peace. Not the emptiness that came with infinite void, but the deep satisfaction of a puzzle finally being solved. "See, that's where you're wrong, Sukuna. You're not standing atop anything. You're just another step on the staircase." The domains collapsed, reality reasserted itself, and when the dust settled, only one of them was still standing. But the real question wasn't who had won the battle. The real question was what Gojo had become in order to win it, and whether his students would recognize their sensei when they finally saw him again. Because something fundamental had changed in those final moments, something that would reshape not just the balance of power between sorcerers and curses, but the very nature of what it meant to be human in a world where strength could transcend mortality itself. And somewhere in the ruins of Shibuya, Geto's consciousness stirred with the realization that his best friend had finally found a way to catch up to him on the other side of life and death.